Ichimon Japan is made possible by listeners like Natasha. Thank you so much for becoming a part of the Japankyo Patreon community. If you would like to make sure that we can keep bringing you more content like this, then head on over to japankyo.com/Patreon and sign up. Milk chocolate was introduced to Japan at some point in history, and
people like it in Japan.
People like it, and eating too much of it is, not good. So it all comes together. When you see sexy panties, it'll make blood come out your nose.
Of course.
Yeah. So
if you can't see the connection already, I don't know why we're talking.
I know. Yeah. Welcome to Ichimon Japan.
Welcome.
Hey, you messed it up. I'm Tony, and
I'm Ryan.
All right, so
I wanted to jump in earlier today.
Yeah. You beat me. All right, so I was going to say Ichimon means one question. We ask one question every episode about Japan and try to answer it. So today's question is: can sexy things give you anime-style nosebleeds?
Specifically anime style, so not even just a nosebleed, but it has to gush out. Like
we're gonna explore all aspects of nosebleeds, but I do want to start with that because that is perhaps one of the first places that people get exposed to this whole idea of sudden nosebleeds due to something that you normally wouldn't expect causes a nosebleed, right?
In anime, generally it's like a red fountain that then just sort of disappears. Wouldn't it be great if they made it more realistic, where like they just had blood all over the wall now? And
yeah, like all over their clothes. It like goes on the other person's face that they're standing in front of.
And just make it like that's just a part of their world. Like in the background, occasionally you just see someone like mopping up blood.
Yeah. Oh, I guess somebody saw something sexy.
Never go to a strip club.
Well, yeah, or like, look at those sexy newspapers with all the like grabbier like swimsuit models, Japanese trains with like the salarymen that look at those, like they'd be covered in blood. They would be absolutely like, flooding in blood.
The corner of every konbini would just be a red mess.
So so obviously those things don't happen. So I think we can immediately rule out that people generally don't gush like geysers of blood out their noses for, well, as far as I know, any reason. I've never seen it. So
it usually looks like so much blood they should probably immediately go to a doctor.
Yeah, exactly. It's like like the old anime where like you'd or even like some samurai movies, right? You like cut them open and then it just like shoots blood all over the place, basically like that. But there are some really, really interesting stuff like that go into the background of these ideas. And as I was investigating this, I uncovered some stuff that I didn't know, and I was like utterly pleasantly surprised by some of the stuff that I found. But before we start addressing directly the whole anime sexy thoughts nosebleed thing, let's go back a little bit to another related thing in a way. Chocolate, peanut butter, not peanut butter, sorry, peanuts, but maybe by extension peanut butter. I don't know. I haven't heard that. Certainly
avoid Reese's.
Avoid Reese's. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. All right. So let's make it clear here for anybody who hasn't heard of this. In Japan, you might hear some people say, if you eat too much chocolate, it will give you a nosebleed. Same goes for peanuts. If you eat too many peanuts or too much peanuts, is that a collective noun? Peanuts? One peanut?
It is in Japanese, but I don't know if it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, in English, it's not. So I guess you would say too many peanuts. Yeah.
I meant in Japanese English.
So if you
just think of how my students talk.
So if you eat too many peanuts, it'll give you a nosebleed. That is pretty common knowledge. Now, that doesn't mean that every single person believes it, but a reasonable amount of people, a significant amount of people do say this and do believe it. And I think just about everyone is at least aware of this idea.
I had never heard peanuts were related, to be honest.
I think chocolate is more common, but also I think just chocolate is more commonly eaten.
Yeah.
You don't hear about peanuts so much in Japan, right?
I've seen them on sale, but they come in little tiny pouches, not like the giant tubs you get in America. And I think people just get them mostly for ingredients for cooking things.
Yeah, you do see it in stuff, but like I just have the impression that you hear about peanuts more in the US. Like, for example, I don't know where it is, but there's somewhere in the US where boiled peanuts is like a famous thing, right? But in Japan, there's no like peanuts are a thing here, right? There's like famous things all over the country, but I don't remember ever hearing of like we're famous for peanuts.
I'm not into like sports at all, but peanuts is kind of like a sporting good food that you eat at a stadium,
Right? Yeah,
right?
like
In America,
baseball, I believe is quite yeah.
Yeah. Do they do that in Japan? I've never been to a game here.
I have been to a baseball game in Japan, and I don't remember seeing peanuts. Now that was only once, and it was like over 10 years ago, so I may be just wrong, but
Was it the Tigers though?
it was the Tigers. It was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, so these things get said and you hear them and some people believe them, but are they true? Are they based in any semblance of truth? Like how much chocolate do you have to eat for this to happen? Will it happen? So
I mean, eventually you could probably just eat so much your stomach explodes and then blood might come out.
yes. So I think
So yes, it's true.
so if we look at the actual phrasing of what people are saying, like then yeah, right? Because it's tabe sugiru, to eat too much. Like right there in that, it's already like you're eating too much, therefore you should not be eating that amount. Now, like something bad will happen, right? Whether that's a nosebleed or not, let's answer that. So if you look in English and in Japanese, eventually you start to find articles that basically all dismiss this. Like in Japanese, there are articles where you see quotes from doctors specifically saying, no, there's no medical evidence for this. There's nothing based in science to support this.
What a surprise.
Yeah, whoa, all right. So where does this come from? Well, there's many theories. All right. With chocolate specifically, and people seem to talk about chocolate a bit more than peanuts. I guess, like I said, chocolate seems to be the bigger concern. Peanuts is a thing, but not as much. So with chocolate, there are some supposedly, scientific reasons given for this. For example, there's 3 substances that are often cited. Let's see. One is tyramine, which is supposed to give... it's supposed to elevate the blood pressure. And that does have a foundation in science, but there's not enough tyramine in the chocolate to elevate your blood pressure to the point where it like shoots out your nose, right?
To the point where it becomes a super soaker.
And then there's caffeine, which again, supposed to do things like, elevated blood pressure, excite you, everybody knows like caffeine does have those kinds of effects, but again, there's no foundation in science for this. We see people that drink far more coffee on a daily basis than consume chocolate, and they consume far more caffeine through coffee. But for example, we don't see people at Starbucks shooting or even dripping blood out their nose, right?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure coffee is in general just more popular than chocolate.
Exactly.
Here.
Yeah. So there's, like a cappuccino, like, there's plenty of caffeine in there, far more than probably in your average bar of milk chocolate. But, and then the last one.
Theobromine?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. That one's supposed to do things like, give you heart palpitations and basically, put you in that sort of altered, like uncomfortable state. There's no real evidence to back that up. And there's no real connection to nosebleeds of any kind. So right there, these supposedly scientific explanations, all right, out the window. But why did this emerge then? Why did this idea of chocolate?
Real quick, I want to point out, like, if you assume all 3 of these rumors are true, then it causes high blood pressure, double high blood pressure with caffeine, and heart palpitations.
Yeah.
That implies chocolate's almost like a cocaine level unhealthy food that you can just give to children and no one cares.
Yeah. Just a little bit. Don't go overboard now, because, gonna go all like...
You can have 1 chocolate bar, but if you have 2, you'll die.
Yeah, well, actually, we are going to talk about eating so much of something that it could kill you, and it's related to this whole nosebleed thing. But that is not yet. That's going to be after the break. So that's a little tease.
You tease.
Yeah, I know. Well, we got to tease to keep people listening because, we always go on tangents. So anyway, so I was trying to look into, is there some kind of justification, some kind of origin for this idea that chocolate causes nosebleeds? Now, one website, I found it on two websites, Japanese language websites. One was specifically a website that talks about urban legends. And, it said, okay, this isn't true. Here is a reason why, some people say. So according to this site, in 1877, when chocolate was introduced, it was apparently milk chocolate. And at that time, people didn't really the custom of drinking milk wasn't really, a thing. So when people explained what chocolate was, they would say that it had ushi no chichi. Now, chichi can mean milk, or it can also mean breast.
Also, it's Gohan's mother.
Yeah, and Gohan's mother, yes. So, ushi no chichi can mean cow's milk. Okay, so people would say, it has cow's milk in it. And yeah, it's milk chocolate. Okay, cow's milk, that makes sense. Now, milk chocolate is brown. And chichi sounds like chi, which means blood. So somewhere along the lines, people, I guess, understood it that it had cow's blood in it. And because it was that kind of brown, reddish color, it supported the idea. And so if you eat too much so if you eat this cow's blood chocolate, then you are going to produce more blood, and I guess so much blood that it's going to come out your nose.
Are you producing more, or is it like literally just being mixed into your blood? Like it just merges with you?
So according to the two sites that I saw in Japanese, again, they were Japanese websites, that you produce more blood.
I mean, by that logic, the cure for baldness would be to eat hair. Which might work. I don't know if anyone's tried that. Disclaimer, that will not work. Do not try that.
Yeah, please. You're going to probably end up choking on hair long before you get anything out of it. So now this immediately, like, okay, you can't verify this. I don't know. I couldn't find any other like citations or anything like that seemed legit. So please don't believe that this is exactly the case. I just, out of curiosity, I decided, so when was milk chocolate actually invented? A cursory search on Google pointed to 1875 by a Swiss chocolatier. So supposedly 2 years later in Japan, they already had milk chocolate. So that seems already a little doubtful. And then on another website,
if
I saw
invented milk chocolate,
Japan,
I would want to share it with the world as fast as possible.
Yes, so I'm not saying it's not possible, but
I mean, dark chocolate's older, right? Because that stuff sucks.
Yes.
You need to have this better chocolate quick.
Definitely. So I saw that Japan did start to get some chocolate in like the 1700s, I think.
Wow.
So,
but no one ate it until 1877.
Well, probably because it was, very controlled. Probably it was the foreigners bringing it in, and it wasn't really widespread.
No, they just use it like building materials.
Just paste bricks together with chocolate.
Yeah.
And then on another side, I saw that it was in the 1900s when milk chocolate started to be introduced to Japan. So, the whole claim seems kind of shaky. But anyway, moving on. And then another aspect of the explanation that I read was that it wasn't until Showa, the year 30 in the period of Showa, which corresponds to 1955, that chocolate really started to become, widespread or mainstream. Up until then, it was quite a luxury item. And so mothers would tell their children, or guardians would tell their children's that eating too much chocolate was give you nosebleeds, and that was a way of discouraging eating chocolate. And then another
mothers.
And another thing that I read was that because there was so much energy like content within chocolate, so much like nutritional value that, they had to tell their children to not eat too much of it because I guess, they just couldn't handle it and thus it would like come out their noses or something. I don't know. So,
I mean, it's kind of similar to in the US where people just tell you you'll be like really hyper if you eat it. It just, it doesn't end up coming out your nose.
Yeah. So, and as you'll see from, what we're going to keep discussing until the very end when we bring it all together, like there are little elements of truth to aspects of this. And so you can kind of see where, I guess,
chocolate does indeed exist.
Yeah, chocolate exists. Milk chocolate was introduced to Japan at some point in history. And
people like it in Japan.
People like it. And eating too much of it is, not good. So it all comes together. When you see sexy panties, it'll make blood come out your nose.
Of course.
Yeah. So
if you can't see the connection already, I don't know why we're talking.
I know. Yeah. Anyway, so what I do think makes total sense is that at some point, adults told children like, don't eat too much of this because it'll make blood come out your nose, and because either A, they don't want to spend so much money on chocolate because it was expensive, or B, there was some understanding that eating too much of it is just not good. Right. So that makes sense. And probably something similar happened with peanuts. I couldn't find any specific story of when peanuts were introduced to Japan, they were like peanut blood and blah, blah, blah. No, I couldn't find anything like that, unfortunately.
You were peanut blood.
Mr. Peanut, who is dead now. They would
Don't eat his
open.
blood or you'll get a nosebleed.
Yeah. So anyway,
I know our readers, our viewers, or
listeners.
There we go.
Yeah.
We'll probably never see the notes we prepare before this, but I just want to point out I really love... So we have notes that are prepared primarily by Tony, but sometimes I contribute a little bit.
Yeah.
But anyway, for the peanut section, it literally says, "Doctors say no." That's the entire section.
Well, because when I was trying to find more information on the peanut thing, all I could find was a couple articles in Japanese of doctors saying, no, that's not a thing.
Like, I know that's the idea, but like, if you don't know the context, it sounds like you're just being super dismissive. Like, doctors say no, moving on.
Yeah, moving on. All right, enough with peanuts. Okay.
Yeah, peanuts are in general way less popular here, so there's probably not going to be as many stories with chocolate.
True. Yeah. So then just through the process of researching this, and I spent many hours over the course of like 3 days, like trying to decipher all this, putting it all into one thing. For example, I found this one Japanese message board where somebody posted that they remembered being told by their mother at some point that eating too many raisins caused nosebleeds. So they were asking if this was true. And somebody responded saying, no, that's not true. You're probably thinking of peanuts, but that's not true either. So don't worry because raisins don't cause nosebleeds. So I don't know. Maybe there's other foods, but or maybe that was just a really one isolated case. Like this is the only guy in Japan whose mother told him this for some reason. Maybe raisins were expensive at some point.
My theory is just the mother just didn't like raisins and didn't want to buy them.
No, those will give you nosebleeds. Get your hands off that.
Not in my house, filthy raisins.
Okay, so what we see here is a general pattern of there is this idea that when you don't want somebody to eat something, for whatever reason, just tell them that it'll cause a nosebleed. Okay? So
which is a really bad excuse because I've had nosebleeds. They're not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Like if chocolate legitimately did cause nosebleeds and you loved chocolate, you'd probably still eat it anyway.
Just stick a tissue up there. Yeah, and these nosebleeds that we're talking about, they're not like the gushing kind like that you see in anime. These just
these are just normal
nosebleeds, right?
Well, technically they're not nosebleeds because they don't exist, but if they did exist, they would be normal.
That's the impression that I get. Yeah, it wasn't until anime came about when gushing, violent nosebleeds became a thing.
Sometimes it actually throws them backwards, so it's got some like real velocity coming out.
Yeah. It's really impressive. Okay, so then that takes us to the thing that I started with, which was the whole like anime nosebleed thing. And so, like we said, no, that's not a thing. You can't like shoot nose or blood out your nose like a super soaker. All right.
I'm
But
terrified we're going to get some response video where someone's like, yes, I can. And then like, shows himself doing it.
this is not a challenge. If you do that, it's completely because you chose to. We take no responsibility. So please.
Please
that in
don't
mind.
do that.
Yeah.
Even if you just can naturally, please don't share it.
Yeah. So whether you look in English or in Japanese, you quickly find that there is many people saying this is not a thing. There are doctors that are saying this is not a thing. Okay. So where did this come from? Is there any truth to it whatsoever? Because the idea is that, so when you become aroused, so you see, for example, a girl in a swimsuit, or you see like a shot of her panties, like this is like the typical thing that you would see in anime, right? Or a girl says something kind of sexy. And sometimes it works the other way around where a girl ends up with a nosebleed because she sees, a guy doing something or saying something, or she thinks of something. Much rarer. And sometimes you see it played for comedic effect because it's so rare. That's a joke in and of itself. But you see this, right?
Yeah. I assume. I'm not a huge anime watcher.
Well, I found a video compilation that was like 10 minutes, and I'll put that in the show notes. And you do see some girls like shoot blood out their nose or drip blood out their nose sometimes. So I've seen it in clips. I've never seen it in a show that I was just happened to be watching. So the idea is that arousal, sexual excitement, leads to high blood pressure. We heard that before, right? With the caffeine thing and all that. So
yeah,
it's connecting. The idea, when you're trying to explain this through some kind of scientific thing, like that's what people often bring up, that it has something to do with high blood pressure. Thus, it may cause like your veins in your nose to break open, I guess, and cause the blood to come out. So no, when you get excited in that way, it doesn't get to the point where you'd be shooting blood out your nose or even dripping blood out your nose. No. In general, there do seem to be some people that make the claim in Japan and Japanese websites that, oh, this happened to me. And what people say is, well, what happened is probably you had some kind of injury already, something you were picking your nose before, and it just so happened that, two things came together and it was a coincidence. So just in case you're like, no, but this happened to me. Probably there were a couple factors that were coming into play in a convergence of things that, resulted in a nosebleed at just the right time.
Yeah, you're wrong.
Yeah, exactly. You're totally wrong. Sorry. Doctors say no.
Doctors say no.
Doctors say no. Okay. So then
moving on.
So where did this idea come from then, right? So one doctor proposes maybe it has something to do with pro wrestlers. So in Japan, you would see sometimes pro wrestlers cut themselves open, cut their forehead open for dramatic effect, so that the manga publishers, whatever, the manga artists, they started to use this as a way of drama, expressing emotion, inner emotion. And in a sense, you can say, okay, there's validity to that, because when you see this in silly manga, and to all of a sudden show, and I'm going to be pretty blunt here, an erection, that's not funny. That's just creepy, right? But when you see a symbolic representation of sexual excitement in this utterly exaggerated, unbelievable way, that's a joke. That's funny, right? Okay.
I'm nodding.
Good, thank you. So that makes sense. It's a wonderful symbol. There's tons of symbols in manga. It's shorthand for another thing, right? When you see the bubble coming out of the nose as a person sleeping, right? It's just a silly
the pound sign over their head means they're angry,
right? Or spiral eyes, right? They're confused or something, or the sweat drop, right? They're frustrated or angry or something. So there's tons of this stuff, and it just works. In a manga where you don't have audio or moving pictures, you have these nice symbols.
You'll probably be censored for drawing erections.
Yeah, exactly. There's the whole censorship thing in Japan too. So yeah, that makes total sense, and it's funny, it's ridiculous. So okay, but then who was the first person to do this? Okay, so The furthest back I could get was 1970, and it's this guy who is respected in the world of, they call it gyagu manga, so literal gag, you could say it's, it's derived from gag. Gag is like a joke, right? So these joke, funny, oftentimes like very nonsensical types of this genre of manga and anime too eventually, but this guy named Tanioka Yasuji, and he published his breakout hit. He was publishing since he was in high school in like 1959. This guy was born, I think, 1942. But it was in 1970 where he had his like breakout hit. And that title has a very long title. It's called, one second.
I think it's Yasuji no Metta Metta Gaki Tokoza.
Yeah, that's the one. Okay. So it's called Yasuji no Metta Metta Gaki Tokoza. Okay. Kind of like it's really tough to translate this, but it'd be something like Yasuji's course for teaching bad like kids or something like that.
I guess.
Yeah,
Gaki they often translate to like brat.
Brat, yeah, like a bratty kid. So it was just a totally ridiculous, nonsensical, silly manga with all kinds of stuff like that. At the time, ended up producing some catchphrases and some ideas such as gushing blood out your nose. There's an actual term for this, hanaji boo, right? And boo is kind of like the onomatopoeic representation of just blood coming out, blah, boo, right? So hanaji
it's not blah, it's boo, clearly.
Boo, yeah. So hana is nose.
Sounds like a vampire when you say it like that.
Hanaji boo. Hana means nose, and ji in phonetic modification of chi, which is blood.
Rendaku.
So, yeah, rendaku. Yes, for you linguistically inclined people.
I assume at least 90% of the audience are linguistically trained.
Yes, and maybe we can do more about rendaku another day, but basically in some situations, the vowels become voiced. Hey, Tony here in the future, and I'm interrupting because I noticed that in my overly simplistic explanation of rendaku, I misspoke. I said that vowels become voiced, but vowels are already voiced, so that is incorrect. What I meant to say was that consonant sounds undergo a change that makes them become their voiced counterpart. So, for example, ta becomes da, right? And ka becomes ga when it undergoes rendaku. But that is a whole other complicated topic, which we're not going into. So I'll leave it at that. You can look it up if you want to find out more. So let's get back to the nosebleeds. Chi becomes ji. So hana ji is nosebleed, bloody nose. And then boo is, like I said, the sound of it coming out, boo. And so hanaji boo becomes almost like a catchphrase, and I guess the idea really starts to shoot off after that. Becomes a thing, and I guess other manga artists and eventually anime makers they latch onto this, and it becomes a trope. Just to show how popular the manga was at the time, the following year after it began publishing, they made a live action adaptation, and they also made a movie, an animated movie. So this was pretty reasonably popular. When you look up his Tanioka Yasuji's Japanese Wikipedia entry, he's referred to as like a very respected figure in the world of gag manga. So whether he is the one that invented it or simply the one that popularized it within the world of manga, we can't say 100% with 100% certainty.
But we can say with 110% certainty.
But all signs point to him being the guy that made this a thing. So, where the heck did this idea of blood coming out the nose even originate from in the first place? Let's talk about that after we take a brief break. Hey, Tony here. I got a couple quick announcements before we get back to the show. First of all, I was interviewed on Tokyo Podcast. That's a whole other different podcast, not one of the ones that I do. And on that show, I discussed being legally blind and how that motivated me to get serious about learning Japanese. I know I haven't discussed that on this show, but I have on my other podcast called Japan Station. You can check that out in episode 33. But over on Tokyo Podcast, I discuss a few other issues that I didn't discuss on that episode of Japan Station. So if you want to check those episodes episodes out. I will include links in the show notes for this episode. You can find them in your show notes in the podcast app that you're using, or just head on over to japankyo.com/Ichimon Japan. Second, the $3 a month tier is finally up over on the Patreon page. You can go check that out at japankyo.com/Patreon. And signing up for the $3 a month tier will get you access to Japanese Plus Alpha. That is a whole new podcast that I'm doing. It's focused on the Japanese language, and they are relatively short episodes, about 10 to 15 minutes. And I'm going to be releasing about 1 to 2 episodes a month. The first episode is out now, and it's related to eggs. So go check that out if you can afford that. If you really want to support this show and make sure that we can keep producing this in Japan Station and doing all the other stuff over on japankyo.com. And you can also just sign up for as little as $1 a month. Okay, every little bit helps. All right, so with that out of the way, we can get back to all the craziness with the mystery of the nosebleeds in Japan, and we are getting very close to revealing what I think is the origin of all this crazy nosebleed action going on in Japan. So,
welcome back.
So actually, the as I mentioned, that manga, the 1970 manga by Tanioka Yasuji, did have an anime adaptation, I believe, the following year. And I was able to find a trailer on YouTube for an animated film based on a work by Tanioka Yasuji that came out in 1971. However, the trailer, the title is totally different. It's Tanioka no, what was it? Porno.
I think it's Yasuji no Ponorama Yachimae.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Yasuji no Ponorama Yachimae. Okay, so that's
I'm glad that they, even in Japan, have a word like pornorama.
Yeah, so Yasuji's Pornorama, do it, is basically what that means.
Yeah.
And I believe that is the anime adaptation film that I was referring to earlier. However, I couldn't confirm that 100%, but I find it highly doubtful that they made 2 animated films based on his work in the same year. So that there was a DVD release, I believe in late 2019, Blu-ray release in late 2019, and there's a trailer for this thing, and I wanted to check it out to see if the nosebleed was in there. And Ryan, what did you find out?
There are many, many nosebleeds. Probably almost every shot has one. So it's hard to tell what's actually the plot or anything. I'm not familiar with this work at all.
Nor am I.
This
this
trailer.
is the first time that I've heard about this. So, yeah.
And from what's shown in the trailer, it assumes you know what the story is, because it's just shots of topless women who are all drawn very poorly. And a boy who I can't really tell if he's supposed to be the student from the course or if he's just like a young adult, and a weird like bird chicken man.
Yeah.
And every single scene is them staring at topless girls in suggestive poses and having blood shoot out of their nose.
Yeah, so
and they do not try to hide the upper nudity, I guess. The lower nudity is covered. But there's one scene that looks like they're literally just showing sex and somehow is not edited, even though it's on YouTube.
Yeah, I don't know. And there's like 2 versions of that, and I don't think the other one's edited either. It's basically the same thing, but with slightly different cuts. So I will include that in the show notes if you want to check it out. But like I said, it's not like high, like super fancy art or anything. It's like gag manga is usually not known for like being the most beautiful type of anime or manga, because it's really about the comedy and the silliness and the nonsense.
Yeah.
And
I mean, this does not look like it's in a serious tone.
Yeah.
But it does seem to have a strong focus on topless girls.
Yeah, and what I remember seeing, I believe, and if I remember correctly here, I didn't write this down, but that movie is described as like the first adult-oriented animated film, anime film.
Which means
Japan.
We should explicitly state, if you are not listening closely, this is definitely NSFW. If you're gonna,
yeah, it is crudely drawn, but nevertheless, yeah. So just so you're aware that there are tons of nosebleeds. So there you go.
There are indeed nosebleeds.
Yeah, hanajibu. So okay, and then so as I was trying to dig deeper into, is there some kind of older thing behind all this nosebleed stuff? Is there some ultimate connecting factor here? Then on one English website on a message board, I found something that I thought immediately sounded utterly ridiculous, and I could not believe it.
I agree. And doctors say no.
Doctors say nope. It's like a dog, like when you're telling a dog, nope.
Stop that.
And I tried to find if there were any websites or articles that referred to this, and I checked in both English and Japanese, and I was able to find nothing to back this up. But it was ridiculous enough that I do want to just talk about it for a moment. Ryan, can you please take us into this crazy post that I found on a message board?
Okay, so this is going to be a direct quote. I want to stress we are not saying this is true. We both think this is not true.
Yeah.
But it sounded funny, so we're going to read it. So the post says, I have no idea when or by whom the nosebleeding thing started to depict in Japanese visual arts, but the nosebleeding as a sign of excitement is traditionally held to have developed during the feudal times when men and women of the upper classes were supposed to live their lives apart. But of course they needed some way to woo each other. And so the men, while walking on the other side of the street, mentally forced their noses to bleed when they saw someone hot being walked along. And the courting could begin on opposite sides of drawn curtains. Some consider this an accurate history, while others consider it a myth. Probably the truth lies somewhere in between, as usual. Probably it doesn't. If this is true, then this form of specialized nosebleed might have been depicted in art for quite a while, but of that I have no knowledge. Also, I'm pretty sure it has not been in art. Anyway, an interesting thing I just realized is that this is the true story of sexually ritualistic nosebleed. Then, A, women had no need to develop such skills, and B, homosexual men also had no such need. Thus, much of the anime and manga today, especially in the boys' love scene, are not true to the real history. Male homosexual acts were in these times, again, in the upper class, something considered pure and good, as females were worth less and not something you might have easy access to when you felt certain urges. End of his quote.
Yeah. Okay. So, he verified for us that you do see it in come out of women's noses. Okay. So
yes.
there you go. That's a verification for us. But I saw no reference to this anywhere else. I have no idea where this came from. I'm just gonna throw it out there. I think this guy just made it up just for the fun of it.
I don't know if it might have come from a friend of his, but someone made this up.
Yeah. And it's well written.
I mean,
but
how do you mentally make yourself nosebleed?
It's like I don't know. Like you just got to concentrate. And then, I mean, you can't. Have you ever done that thing where you like hold your breath and then you like basically like try to put pressure into your head? I don't know how to explain it well here, but you basically start turning red in the face.
Yeah.
I could see how you could pop a vein in your nose and have some. That seems feasible to me.
And his story says that then the courting would begin on the opposite sides of drawn curtains. Like, why not just start there?
So what I don't get is so you're walking across the street and you see a hot lady in her kimono on the other side of the street, and then you start to will the blood out of your nose. So then she notices and she goes, "Oh, this guy's into me. All right." So
that's why it has to be a geyser, because otherwise they won't see from across the street.
Yeah. So and then there's a formal request to start courtship on the other side of curtains, and there was a time in Japanese history where the upper crust would be very much separated. That was a thing. There was a time, but
according to Tales of Genji, the upper crust also just went through the curtain.
There was also plenty of times of that. Yes, absolutely. And the whole feudal times is such a vague thing. Usually when you say feudal era, you think Sengoku Jidai, Warring States period, but there's no way to know. There's just no solid verifiable.
There's 1,000 years
or...
of Japan that you could call feudal times.
Yeah,
probably more.
So that made me laugh, but it didn't really end up being useful in any sort of significant way. So I kept looking for something where do these nosebleeds come from? I want to know. And I found something which may be something or it may be nothing, but I'm going to propose that it is something. So Ginkgo. Okay. Perhaps you've heard of it in the supplement, the vitamin. Well, I don't think it's technically a vitamin. You would call it a dietary supplement. Ginkgo biloba.
The best name. Oh no, horny goatweed exists. Second best named supplement.
I agree. Yeah, horny goatweed is pretty good. Yeah, and I would believe if you take too much horny goatweed, then
you turn into a horny goat.
With nosebleeds. That seems feasible to me.
It's in the name. I mean, how much more clear do you need it to be?
Oh, goodness. All right. So, where was I? Oh, ginkgo biloba. Yeah. So that is a dietary supplement. All right. They say like it helps with memory and blah, blah, blah. I don't know, a bunch of stuff. So, but that has ties back to Chinese medicine.
So doctors say no.
Doctors say no. But, and Chinese medicine does have a presence in Japan. People still take, they call it kampo, right? And that means Chinese medicine. The kan is the same kan as in kanji. Yeah. Which the Han, in English, you would pronounce it Han, like the Han dynasty, etc., the Han people. So kampo, Chinese medicine, that is a thing. I've seen people, they take like the little powders and whatnot. That is a thing. So it's not, ideas of Chinese medicine have a presence in Japan. All right. So that's established. Now, there is actual evidence that eating too many ginkgo seeds is not good for you. They say it can cause seizures. And in some extreme cases, if you just eat too much of it, it can even cause death. Now, from olden times, and this is, I'm going like what I read in a Japanese language article, but I did see also, for example, the Hong Kong government has a page up that talks about this a little bit. And I've seen other pages that bring this up. So generally speaking, the consensus seems to be that you shouldn't eat too many of these ginkgo seeds. I've seen them referred to as ginkgo nuts as well. And in Japan specifically, they say that you shouldn't eat more of these ginkgo seeds than whatever your age is. And by the way, in Japanese, they're called ginnan. And so, for example, if you're 5 years old, you shouldn't eat more than 5 of these ginkgo seeds.
So Yoda can just have as much as he wants.
Oh, pretty much. He's probably going to run out of stomach space before, he gets anywhere near death. So yeah, if you're 20 years old, don't eat more than 20. If you're 30, don't eat more than blah, blah, blah. It keeps going, right? That's just a general rule of thumb. And one doctor, in a quote in a Japanese article on Business Journal, a Japanese website called Business Journal, is quoted as saying, from olden times, it said that, you shouldn't eat more than your age, and eating too much of it can cause you to get into an excited state and can cause nosebleeds and seizures. Okay, so we're kind of verifying like actual, other evidence that I've seen in other like government websites. And there's a scientific study that I said that I found that looked at 15 other studies and seemed to indicate that there's possible that there's a linkage between the like making it more easy for you to bleed and excessive ginkgo seed consumption. Okay, so it's all kind of coming together here. And like, for example, that same doctor also mentioned a case of like a woman who was 40 years old eating 60 ginkgo seeds and getting taken to the hospital. Same doctor also mentioned like after World War II, there wasn't much food to go around. There are reports of children eating too many ginkgo seeds and dying, right? So there seems to be some connection between excessive ginkgo seed consumption, seizures, maybe like making it easier for you to bleed, perhaps out your nose. And I really don't know much about seizures, but there seems to be at least some minimal connection between nosebleeds and seizures as well. I was looking on English language websites for that. So if you know about seizures, please feel free to email us ichimon@japankyo.com. But that's very, very cursory. All right, so here's my ultimate unified theory, okay? Tony's unified nosebleed theory, okay? So TUNT. We're gonna
also
call
known
it
as
that.
tunt.
Okay, so here goes, all right? I can't verify this because some of these things are just unverifiable because there's no like you're not going to find a book that says this is the first time where I'm going to declare that nosebleeds be blah blah blah. Like you're just not.
And
all
all the doctors keep saying no. So
doctors keep saying no. So, but here is my idea of where everything came from. So, as I said, Japan does use Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine has a presence there. So it would stand to, I think it's reasonable to argue that for a very long time, for centuries and centuries, even back in China, people had an awareness that eating too much ginkgo seeds is not good for you. All right? Something bad will happen. Something perhaps related to a nosebleed. Okay? So there's this idea. You tell children, don't eat ginkgo seeds because it will give you a nosebleed. Right? That seems reasonable, right?
Okay.
Okay. So then the next step, all right, when chocolate and peanuts and whatever, all this stuff starts popping up, parents, they have this idea that you shouldn't eat ginkgo too much. Eating something that has a poison, because ginkgo actually does have ginkgo toxin, which is considered a poison, in it. Even if they don't understand all the ins and outs of why, they have this thing like, okay, so if you eat too much of this, you're going to get nosebleeds. So maybe I should just tell the child, you know how I told you about ginkgo and not eating too much? Then, hey, what about chocolate and peanuts and all this stuff? Don't eat too much of it. Same thing. You're going to get a nosebleed. All right. So try to scare them not to eat too much of it. Okay.
And for one mother, also raisins.
Exactly. One mom just raisins. Couldn't stand them. She's just as bad as ginkgo seeds. But hey, people do eat ginkgo seeds. It's a popular like otsumami, which is like the kind of food that you eat along with like sake and beer. Like when you're at the bar, you can have some ginkgo seeds. They're like roasted with salt. Like that's very popular. So people do eat it. Anyway, so there's this common knowledge that eating too much of this one thing can cause a nosebleed. So that transfers over to chocolate and peanuts and one person raisins. And then so at some point, people start trying to throw in science to explain this, right? They're not saying ginkgo toxin is causing, the chocolate nosebleeds. They're saying caffeine or tyramine or the other one, the theobromine, I think it was, causes nosebleeds. Like, oh, that makes sense. Science, like we love science. That explains it.
We didn't use science, but it sounds like science.
Yeah. Okay, so I believe it. So we get nosebleeds from chocolate because we get high blood pressure. Okay, makes total sense. All right, so enter Tanioka Yasuji. All right, so I don't know, maybe 1969. He's coming up with this silly idea about this manga that has a whole bunch of nosebleeds in it. Or rather, he's trying to come up with a way to express sexual excitement that isn't like showing an erection, right? He's trying to come up with a funny, silly, shorthand way to do this. And then he thinks, oh, but okay, so when you get excited, you get kind of hot under the collar. Your face might get a little red. Oh, maybe, you get high blood pressure. Oh, chocolate. Okay, high blood pressure, nosebleed. Oh, and then what if I make it shoot out and I call it Hanaji? Boo! That's funny. That's really funny. Okay, I should do this. And then he does that. And then that leads to other manga artists latching onto this. And bam, we have, sexy thoughts equals, nosebleeds. And it all connects back to centuries and centuries back, all the way back to Chinese medicine with eating too many ginkgo seeds.
Well, clearly this is the correct theory.
Yep.
And I'm excited to see what the next step after the fountain nosebleeds are. I imagine it'll have something to do with penguins.
So, as any good theory, right, I totally accept the fact that somebody may prove me wrong. Maybe I got something wrong in this.
A doctor may say nope.
Doctor may say, nope. I totally accept that, and I welcome it. I challenge, I encourage the scientific method. So, Ryan, if you come up with anything, or if anybody else comes up with anything, please.
Oh, mine would just be way weirder and based on nothing, which might make it more likely to be true based on how this is going.
But, I think... So, I won't say that... Of course, I can't say that mine is totally true, but I do think
it has the awesome name of Tunt, though, so that gives it a bonus point.
Yeah, I do think that Tunt is convenient enough to seem believable, right? It makes sense. It all clicks together, right?
I mean, the way you say that is exactly the logic they used in assuming chocolate caused nosebleeds.
The
it's
cow's
convenient
blood, right?
enough to assume it's true.
So there you go. Until somebody comes up with a better explanation for why there's so many things that cause nosebleeds in Japan, I am saying that this is the best theory out there. All right.
And as someone who's lived in Japan for 8 years now, there is not a higher than average rate of nosebleeds here.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anecdotally, but I think, and I'm a teacher, so I'm surrounded by like large groups of kids all the time.
Yeah.
I think in 8 years, I think one time a student got a nosebleed.
Yeah, it doesn't happen on a daily basis. Not at all. I will. Okay, so just to, unless you can think of anything else, I just want to say one last thing, which is how do you stop a nosebleed? All right.
Yes.
We've talked about nosebleeds so much, but might as well just tell people. Sometimes you hear, oh, just tilt your head back. No, don't do that, because then you're going to get blood going down your throat and you're going to like be choking on blood. Not good. And then blood in the stomach can actually cause vomiting in some cases, so you don't want that.
From what I saw, it said either sit straight up or lean forward slightly.
Exactly, and then pinch your nose closed, probably close up to the like bone area. I don't remember what that part is called.
Index and thumb right next to the bone.
Yeah, and then
apply pressure for 5 minutes.
Yeah, one place I saw was 10 minutes. So I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes. Just resist the urge to let go.
Yes, continue holding, and you're basically trying to wait for it to clot, I think.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And then one other thing that they say don't do is stick your tissues up your nose, because then that can peel away what's it called? The scab. The scab.
Scab, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, the tissues can definitely impact that, so don't do that. Yep. And very also helpful information I found is if it continues anyway, consult a doctor or healthcare provider.
Yes, this is only when it's like a mundane, like maybe somebody hit you with a soccer ball, or like the weather is really dry out. Like just very normal routine nosebleeds. If something weird is going on, or if like
if this keeps going for 30 minutes, go find a medical professional.
Yeah, and if like the blood that you thought was blood is like clear fluid or something, that's like really, really bad. So go see a doctor. Okay, so anything else, Ryan, or are we?
If it comes out like a super soaker blast, don't wait the 5 minutes. Just go straight to the doctor.
Yeah, and take a video of that as it's happening. But make sure to get to the doctor. But take a video of that, because people do want to see that, I think.
It's probably difficult to drive with a geyser coming out, so find someone to drive you, and then while they're driving, you can like record yourself and narrate what's happening.
Yeah. But I mean,
hold the camera to the side though, or else it's just going to get blood all over it.
Exactly. Like hold a bucket or several buckets.
Make sure to always keep a bucket nearby in case you have nosebleeds.
Yep. All right. So, mystery solved. Can sexy things cause anime-style nosebleeds? No. Okay. So, and for the most part, nosebleeds.
Well, maybe they just haven't been sexy enough yet.
That's true. I guess so, huh? Yeah. Well. That's okay. Anyway, not going to go down that road.
At some limit, maybe.
All right.
At some threshold.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if you have any counter arguments, please send them over to ichimon@japankyo.com. All right. Goodbye, nosebleed topic. Okay, guys. See you next time. Hey, glad you're still listening. So I wanted to clear up just a couple things really quickly. First of all, anime nosebleeds are generally associated with sexual arousal or thinking perverted things, but I think that in some cases you may also be able to say that they happen when you become really embarrassed or ashamed of something. So it's not a total like arousal equals nosebleed kind of thing. But in very general terms, yes, I think that you would have to say that sexual excitement is the most common thing associated with those explosive kind of nosebleeds that you see in anime and manga. Second, I wanted to clear up the title of the 1970 manga by Tanioka Yasuji that is credited with having started the whole hanaji-bu / blood shooting out the nose trope. It's called Tanioka Yasuji no Metta Metta Gakido Koza. And the translation that I offered was not that great. And the reality is that it is a rather tricky title to translate. But you could say that it's something along the lines of Yasuji Tanioka's course for educating kids how to be brats. Like I said, it's a really tricky title to translate. Gaki means brat, do means like the way of, koza is a course or a lesson. So the implication seems to be that because this is such a ridiculous manga that shows bad behavior, you would not want your young boy or your young kid to read this, and if they do, then they'll learn how to be a brat, right? And just to clear up the whole live action and animated film confusion that I briefly mentioned during the discussion. So that manga got adapted into a live action film, which kept the same title. I unfortunately haven't been able to find a trailer or anything for that film. It also got adapted into the animated film that we discuss after the break, the one that's got that crazy title, Yasuji no Pornorama Yachimae. And we talked about the trailer for that one that was rather NSFW. So I will include a link to that video in the show notes at japankyo.com/Ichimon Japan. But I wanted to clear up that whole confusion because I know during the discussion I said that I thought this was the anime adaptation, but I wasn't totally sure. I did a little bit more research and I do appear to have been correct. So if you're curious about seeing how all that stuff is written and the video and all that stuff and whatever else that we talked about today, links and all that are going to be at japankyo.com/Ichimon Japan, or most of them will be in your podcast app. But I know sometimes some podcast apps have a little bit of trouble with like videos and stuff like that. So that's why I leave that out of those show notes. Anyway, thanks for listening and see you next time.